We are back with yet another NFL recap. The postseason kicked off on Saturday, and that is where we'll start with the Chargers-Texans game. And let's just say that for the very early portions of this game, it seemed like the Chargers were in way more control, to be honest. Now, they got off to a quicker start, getting the ball to the likes of McCarthy, Will Dissly, and even Tucker Fisk over the course of this first drive. Within a couple plays, they would be stopped short of the line of game before Azeez Al-Shire, returning from the 3-game suspension after his hit on Trevor Lawrence, would end up getting injured. They would then lose yardage on the next play and have Cameron Dicker kick a field goal to put them up 3-0. Then, on the first play of the next possession for the Texans, you have Alohi Gilman actually making a textbook punch-out on John Mechie III as he's falling to the ground, and Derwin James Jr. would get the fumble recovery to put the Chargers in prime position to get a double-digit lead, potentially, a 2-score lead. Instead, the Texans defense managed to hold with the likes of Will Anderson Jr. and even Mario Edwards Jr. getting pressure on him to force Cameron Dicker to kick yet another field goal from short range. Both defenses, for most of the rest of this first half, would hold strong. You would have Texans doing their absolute best to send pressure on Justin Herbert and force him into some errant passes. But for a person in C.J. Stroud that was expected to take the next step this season after a pretty solid rookie season, depending on who you ask, he had definitely struggled over the course of this season. The numbers don't lie about that. The eye test even doesn't lie about that. And that was displayed through the first part of this game here. I mean, he was making some errant decisions of his own. And that would culminate in a sequence where C.J. Stroud would try to get rid of the ball, I guess, but he just kept it in bounds for some reason instead of getting it completely out of there. And a Canadian D-back in Deion Leonard managed to get the interception pretty easily. It was just completely uncontested. There's no reason to even throw the ball in that direction. Very hard to grasp. If that wasn't enough, though, the very next play for the Chargers would see Justin Herbert try to throw another fuck it ball to the left side of the field near the boundaries, and Kamari Lassiter, the rookie from Georgia, did a great job of undercutting this pass, which was intended for Quentin Johnston, and he would intercept the ball as well. Still, even with these turnovers being forced by both teams, neither team was really able to go on and capitalize off this. And during this stretch of time, they would show or talk about a stat line that stated that the Texans, despite having a winning record and despite making the playoffs, had a 0 or a point differential of 0 throughout the course of the entire season. They gave up the same amount of points that they scored over the course of the entire season. So things were looking rough if their defense did not show up. Luckily for them, Derek Stingley Jr., Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, to an extent, they were trying their hardest to keep them in it for so long. The fact that it had gotten past halfway through the second quarter, and with the mistakes that they were making, they managed to hold the Chargers to just 6 points. That was a miracle in and of itself, but something had to give, or they were going to eventually crumble. They would force a punt, but it would be downed at the 1-yard line. And just when we thought it couldn't get worse for the Texans, it very much did, as you would have them get a few yards here, try to string together a couple of first downs, things like that, and then Titus Howard decides to get a tripping penalty called on him. pushing them back even further. So they eventually get to 3rd and 16, where the snap is fumbled by the likes of CJ Stroud, and he has to go run back to recover the football. Then he's running all the way over to the right side of the boundary, trying his hardest to make a play on the scramble drill. And luckily enough, when they absolutely had it, backs against the wall, backed into a corner, Xavier Hutchinson would streak open across the middle of the field, and CJ Stroud would get him the ball for a 34-yard gain. Quite literally after the game, you would have D'Amico Ryan say that this play was the very spark that allowed the Houston Texans to get going. And surely enough, that's exactly how it felt like. I mean, instantly, they just got into a rhythm completely, as over the course of the next few plays, you would have Nico Collins combine for 50 total yards on 2 catches, including a 13-yard touchdown catch. Then they force a quick 3-and-out on the Chargers, with Quentin Johnston dropping yet another pass as Azeez Al-Shire would actually return to the game and affect the play, giving the Texans yet another chance to control a bit more of the momentum here. And surely enough, with a CJ Stroud run this time, using the legs after the play broke down, he would get 27 yards to get the Texans in field goal range before they got a little deeper into a more favorable spot for Kaimi Fairbairn, and he would get it from 41 yards out, giving the Texans, despite being down for that much time, a 10-6 lead. That being said, it seemed like on this drive they would revert to some of their most of the first half ways, I would suppose. They would get another good start to this drive with a Nico Collins 41-yard catch, but then you would have Joe Mixon fumble after it was forced and recovered by Tony Jefferson Sr., who it came out of retirement, which was news to me. Now, he had been on the coaching staff for the Ravens, ironically enough, one of the last teams that he was on prior to calling it a career initially. I guess anytime you have a Harbaugh involved, one of the Harbaughs is going to get their hands on Tony Jefferson in some way. So, hey, he's a part of this team. The Chargers, with a good stop here, you would expect them to at least try to gain some momentum back with this next drive. Instead, outside of a face mask penalty that allowed them to get further down the field with the help of a Ladd McConkey catch initially, they would stall this opportunity out completely. Runs didn't really go much of anywhere because you're not expecting Gus Edwards to make too much happen after the initial contact. Really, he's not that kind of running back. And then on 4th and 2, you would have a very short route called to Quentin Johnston, who couldn't even bring it down anyways. And even if he did, he's a yard short. He didn't have enough control of the football at that point to try to reach his arm over. So they subsequently turned the ball over on downs. They did have to settle for a field goal on their next drive. The Texans, despite getting some good plays to go, penalties would eventually affect them. And it did help also that Derwin James Jr. luckily dropped this potential interception by CJ Stroud as well, to at least ensure that they would have control of the football for a little longer and be able to protect it without turning the ball over and losing that battle. Eventually, Houston would go up 13-6 with this. They would continue to keep the Chargers' offense at bay. And while their offense did stall out for yet another drive of 3-and-out of their own, their defense was on Justin Herbert's ass all game long. And to just exacerbate the meltdown he was having in this, he would throw an interception to the likes of Eric Murray for a 38-yard pick six. And I would state that this one is all, and I mean all, on him. McCarthy, as great of a wide receiver as he is not that tall to go out and get the high pass that he threw. Like, it was out of reach for him. And surely enough, it went right through his hands and a little over the top of him. Like, you expected him to bring that down. I don't know why. And you promptly got what you deserved. To make things even worse, he would throw another interception on this drive, despite the likes of McCarthy getting involved tremendously, combining for 29 yards over the course of the previous two plays. But then Derek Stingley Jr. would get them, put them in prime position to score and really put this game away. Even though it felt like with the way the defense was playing, it already was done. The Chargers defense still had a little sign of life though. And surely enough, Khalil Mack would get the sack that eventually forced the Texans to settle for the field goal. But I don't know. It very much hurt them that Justin Herbert just completely crumbled in the big moment like this. But it also didn't help that most of their other wide receivers were not performing. You have your usual suspect in Quentin Johnston just not doing much of anything. But even on the last interception, you have Will Dissly basically gift the pick to fucking Derek Stingley Jr., just throwing it right into his hands after he dropped the pass. Like, different wide receivers on this end, left and right, were doing this shit. But if there's any silver lining here, it's the fact that McCarthy was able to go and do what he did in spite of all of this shit. On this 3rd and 26, after Will Anderson Jr. and Mario Edwards Jr. would get back-to-back sacks on back-to-back plays, you would have Justin Herbert have to throw up a pass out of desperation. And even in this one, he had to do a little bit of scrambling because the pressure was getting there completely and breaking the line down. Right? So he throws it over the middle, past the first down line to McCarthy, who eventually gets it, breaks the tackle attempt from Miles Bryant, and then speeds away for what would be an 86-yard touchdown. Even though that was solid, that was good, the woes still continued for the Chargers. Because Cameron Dicker's PAT would be blocked by a D lineman. And then while it was still up in the air, because it never went past the line of scrimmage, he would take it upon himself to try to bat the ball down. And he subsequently got lit up by Neville Hewitt. And D'Angelo Ross would strike again. Now, this is the same player who managed to deflect the punt. He got right in there earlier in the game and blocked it, but it still traveled near the 30-yard line for Houston. So it wasn't really effective. But this time it will work out completely for him. He would get the ball and return it for a two-pointer, since that's what blocked PATs are worth. Riding that, the Texans got the ball right back, and Joe Mixon just took it upon himself to end the game. Completely. Joe Mixon would get everybody here. He would get down Deion Leonard, and then eventually, on this 17-yard touchdown run, just completely exposed both Deion Henley and Christian Fulton on this 4th down conversion to seal up the ball game. Justin Herbert would throw another pick to Derek Stingley Jr. on this next drive, but by that point, it wasn't really moving the needle too much. The Texans, after having their rough start with CJ Stroud, would eventually take the game 32-12 in what actually became the very first instance of this score, giving us a scoregami to open up the playoffs. So that's pretty interesting. It was just all bad for the Chargers. You got to look at Justin Herbert to start out. I mean, he completed the lowest percentage of his passes in an NFL game he's played into this point, with just 43.8%. His QBR was the lowest it had ever been in a game that he's played at 40.9. And just a single touchdown to 4 interceptions in this single game. A single elimination game as well. When, keep in mind, in the regular season, he had thrown just 3 picks all season. And had given himself multiple streaks of consecutive passes without even so much as throwing one during the year. But you throw that many in just this game alone. That's absurd. And again, it didn't help that no other receiver outside of McCarthy did anything notable. I mean, you got receivers with a catch for 10 yards on 4 targets. You got Quentin Johnson not bringing down a single catch or target and having multiple drops. Tucker Fisk, just the 1 catch for 15 yards to open up the ball game. And then Will Dissly had only 2 catches but 5 targets. And a crucial drop that led to an extra score for the Texans. Like, it could be a redundant thing to say, but literally, it is about ball control. It's about having a clean game and protecting the ball, especially in these moments. And it's about defense when it gets down to the postseason. If you cannot make all that happen, you're going to find yourself in a rut. And it seemed like they could bait the Texans with the way the Chargers defense had been playing into making some of those crucial mistakes. But at least they and the likes of CJ Stroud managed to turn things around and get themselves together. He would throw for 282 yards, a touchdown and an interception, while completing 66.7% of his passes and also rushing for 42 yards in this game. Nico Collins would have 7 catches for 122 yards and a touchdown. Joe Mixon would also have 25 rushes for 106 yards and a touchdown in this one. Sacks were rampant in this one. Will Anderson Jr. would have 1.5, and so would Mario Edwards Jr. Danico Autry also added 1, for a total of 4 as a team. They also had 11 pass deflections. And credit to the Texans defense, the Chargers were 3-11 on third downs, and did not convert their only 4th down attempt. Just making them completely inept and one-dimensional even. That was going to be the demise of this Chargers team, by the way. I mean, yes, McCarthy was probably going to get the most looks, but he alone had 9 receptions for 197 yards and a touchdown, with his performance resetting the rookie wide receiver record for most yards in a postseason debut. Now, Puka Nacua had his 181 last year. So, the fact that you have receivers in back-to-back draft classes making that happen is pretty exceptional. But if that's all that you have to rely on, and you don't have an effective counter to that, you're going to lose every time, regardless of how good this looks. I mean, as a unit, they ran for just 50 yards on 18 attempts, averaging 2.8 yards per carry. When has that ever won a team anything in the postseason? The only way they would have truly gotten away with it is if you didn't lose the turnover battle. But your turnovers were so costly, and the fact is that you certainly couldn't overcome that, especially when one of them happened to result in a touchdown, a free touchdown. At that point, like, you just have to be smarter in your decision making at that point. The Texans also, even if they stalled out time and again, by forcing them to turn the ball over and give them the ball back immediately in some of these cases, the Texans were able to steal 34 minutes and 25 seconds at time of possession, running 16 more plays and averaging more yards per play, while being more effective in the red zone in reaching the red zone on 4 different occasions. Chargers only managed to make that happen one time. And they did not capitalize on that, because that was the possession after the fumble from Mechie. And it starts there, really. You gotta win. You can't force one of your opponents to make a mistake. You have to capitalize off of it way better than just settling for field goal after field goal time again. So, subsequently, the Chargers season ends, and the Texans would have to await their next opponent, as the bracket was still relatively undecided. I mean, the very first game of the playoffs, you're not going to really have a tell on who you're facing just yet. CJ Stroud would set multiple milestones here, as he would become the 6th quarterback to win a playoff game in their first 2 consecutive seasons, along with the likes of Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Flacco, Mark Sanchez, Russell Wilson, and Brock Purdy. He would also become, with this win, the most prolific Texans quarterback in franchise history when we're talking about playoff football, as he is the only one in franchise history to mount multiple victories in the playoffs. The next best Texans quarterbacks in this regard had just a single one throughout the course of their Texans tenure. They were an expansion team, so to an extent, I get that, but damn, were they in a rut before CJ Stroud got here. And that's all I gotta say. Even in a season where he's been regressing, to reach that point is definitely something special. You have to appreciate that. Moving on to the Steelers and Ravens. I'm not going to lie to you. I think I'm about to cover this differently. All credit to the likes of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry just absolutely balling out in this ball game. For real. From the very jump of this game, they won at the line of scrimmage. They controlled completely the time of possession, as Baltimore had 39 minutes and 33 seconds of possession in this ball game. And when it counted, they completely nullified the Steelers' offense. Completely. We'll get to the defense in a second. Lamar Jackson did put it all on the line. They wanted him to perform very well in this case, and he did just that, opting to use his legs a bit more in this postseason. I mean, he would have almost as many runs as completed passes in this ball game, being deadly accurate while also being a just complete X factor in such a balanced rushing attack with him and Derrick Henry. I mean, they would combine for 41 total rushes and 267 total yards with 2 touchdowns by themselves, including Derrick Henry just completely sprinting away from everybody on the very last touchdown he scored. They had complete dominion over the Steelers, it felt like. They could do anything that they wanted to them. You had Derrick Henry stiff-arming the shit out of Minka Fitzpatrick to open up the game, and that would be followed up with something even worse later. But as far as the Steelers go overall, they're a joke of an organization. And I think that most of the players, especially on the defensive end, who appeared in that ball game, they have to go. Especially with the way that first half went. Like, if you're not gonna play with the kind of heart and effort that it takes to win ball games, you got to get the fuck out. It's as simple as that. Like, at multiple points, I kid you not, and especially one play that stands out to me, you have Lamar Jackson trying to extend the play and look for an open man. I literally see niggas jogging on the football field as the play is developing. Instead of letting it break down to help them find an open man, how about you actually get your fucking ass over there? Try to guard up, try to lock him down, try to force Lamar Jackson into doing something stupid. Instead, you give him the pass he's looking for, and subsequently enough, they get the first down en route to him eventually finding himself another situation in that specific drive, I think, where he goes, extends the play, and gets it out to wide open Justice Hill in the fucking flats for a 21 burger in the first half. Quite literally, this game was a travesty. If the Ravens hadn't kneeled out the clock, I kid you not, the Steelers would have given up 300 yards on the ground, which has never happened at any point in their history, I believe. And it's certainly the most that they've given up in any single game to this point. You get owned like that in higher stakes. That's the playoffs. It is playoff football. There's no way that you are giving up that much yardage. And not to mention, too, you'd figure that if you're going to let them run all over you like this, that you have at least a counter to make their defense pay for all of that. Instead, what you get is a Steelers-led rushing attack tallying just 29 yards on 11 fucking carries on the night for 2.6 yards per carry. Najee Harris has the nerve to go out and say that this is probably his last game with Pittsburgh. I bet you they will be glad to get your ass out of there if you yourself are contributing just 17 yards on 6 rushes because you literally do not know where the fuck you're running to or how to get through different rushing lanes, through the different gaps of the offensive line. There was literally a play on the night where he had an open lane to run through, and I kid you not, he's running into his own linemen as they try to block. What kind of shit is that? That's horrible, man. And not to mention, too, they have people out here, different pundits and things, saying that it may be up for Mike Tomlin. And I think his reputation does precede him. They'll probably give him another chance. But what I will get on him for him is this. Roll with one guy in the postseason. Roll with one man. It was cool to try to alternate between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson in the regular season with relatively low stakes on the line at that particular point. I understand it. By the postseason, you should have a good idea of where your overall roster is and have some level of continuity going into this type of football. You should be at your best at this point of time. There shouldn't be a question of who should be starting in your roster at this point, especially at the quarterback position. That's a no-no, especially in playoff caliber football. And yet, especially when Russell Wilson wasn't playing at his best in this game, because even though the box score says that he performed fine, was way too little and way too late. But you roll with one person either way. Why are you giving both of these quarterbacks reps in the ball game? There's no reason to do that right now. Everything on the line, you can't play that game right now. It should already be figured out. That in itself is just one of the problems here. And that fucking defense. Oh my gosh, that defense. The fact that you made franchise history in the worst of ways to not just anybody. This is the AFC North rivalry of all of them in that division. Some may argue it's the best rivalry in football. Steelers, Ravens games are predicated on physicality, effort, grit, grind, hustle, every single down, every single play, every single second of the game. You're busting your ass off trying to stop the other team, or at least offering a form of resistance to where damn near those players are fighting to get back up off the fucking ground because they're gonna earn those yards rather than just have them be handed over to them by you. You're not getting through anybody on this team. If there's an unstoppable force and a movable object, nigga, you're not going anywhere. You gotta move me to go and get some extra yards. But I ain't gonna make it easy on you. I'm gonna hurt you, and I'm gonna hurt you bad. That's what these games are like. And yet, at no point did they seem to offer that kind of resistance. At all. Ravens had the likes of Jonathan Ogden and Terrell Suggs there in the game. I can guarantee you that some of the greatest Steelers defenders were probably watching this game in person or at home in their own personal space. Troy Polamalu, Mean Joe Green, James Harrison, writhing in pain, writhing in anger, watching their team and their defensive unit get done like this. After what they established so long ago, to have that kind of pride instilled in an organization and see it all go to waste within just a few short minutes of the game alone, it's a crime. The Ravens, I kid you not, managed to just completely take all the energy out of them for some reason, to the point where they weren't playing with any heart. As good as the Ravens offense is, the fact that the Steelers gave up 3 different touchdown drives of 85 or more yards in this ball game alone, which happens to be the most since 1966, that says a lot about where your unit is defensively. And Alex Highsmith, or at least Cameron Hayward, was probably alluding to Alex Highsmith in this regard, but he eventually ended up being right with what he said a couple weeks back about not having everybody on the same page and everybody committed to the same goals. It culminated in that trash display you saw on, Prime, which, again, a fair amount of people have it. Not everybody have it, but that's besides the point. Millions of people watched you get beat down like this. Such an esteemed organization going to waste completely. In a stretch where, again, they're like, Tomlin's probably not gone anywhere, but there's a reason why they're calling for him. This is his 8th straight season without a playoff win, which has never happened for this long when it comes to Super Bowl winning coaches. None of those guys have went more than 3 seasons without a win in the playoffs consecutively. And Tomlin's the first to do that by a long shot now. Not to mention that in every single one of these losses, they're getting the shit kicked out of them in every aspect of the game. And it's horrible to see that. Have a great start to this season once more. And yes, the difficulty was getting ramped up, but you'd think that you'd show a little more fight than coming to, with this game right here, which they would lose 28-14, eventually lose 5 straight ball games to playoff caliber teams and twice to the Ravens in less than a fucking month to get bounced out of the first round and go back home. That's criminal. I think no better play encapsulates this smackdown than what Isaiah Likely managed to do on this very drive that would see Justice Hill get in off of the reception from Lamar Jackson. On an earlier play on this drive, just before they would score, you would have Isaiah Likely get the ball prior to them spiking it. And he would pick up a nice gain. In the midst of that, he stiff-armed the dog shit out of Cameron Sutton and put his bitch ass on the ground. A player like him shouldn't even be on the fucking field right now playing football, if you ask some people. Given what his ass did to get suspended from the Lions last season, when he decided to go ahead and commit domestic violence shit. You have that player playing in this ball game. And he was picked up by the Steelers because they wanted to give him a chance. Not only are you not playing out there with any effort, but you're going to get smacked down like that by Isaiah Likely. And keep in mind, too, afterwards, the same person that would have the gall to go ahead and put his hands on a woman didn't do shit to Isaiah Likely. He let that shit go on completely. And his teammates did not come to his defense at all. I saw no Steelers player go over there to defend him, pick him up, anything. He had to take that shit. And that's exactly how this game went. Because that defense, especially now, a defense once filled with proud men on their sidelines who weren't going to take shit from anybody. Look no further than Joey Porter Sr. even. Guys like that. Enforcers. Willing to put everything on the line to make sure you weren't going to succeed on that given Sunday against their football team. Now it just seems to be filled mostly with fucking punks who don't give a shit about the culture and playing to grind out ball games. You want to have the shit handed to you, and it doesn't work that way. You got to earn it. You got to work for it. But nobody else wanted to outside of 4 players who I'll shout out. TJ Watt is in quite the unfortunate situation. He has been a staple for so long. Even with him having a down season, he's still been one of the best edge rushers in the league. In his career, he has yet to win a playoff game. But he still, while not recording a single stat in this ball game and getting clamped up to an extent by the likes of Roger Rosengart, a rookie, he at least was trying his absolute hardest out there. And in that moment, that is what you want. Cameron Hayward, another one who has just a few playoff wins in his career with this team. He got himself banged up trying to stop this team, at least. Landon Roberts is a seasoned veteran. He was at least dishing out some hits, trying to make the Ravens offense at least feel his presence on different plays. And though it wasn't enough, that doesn't go unnoticed. So respect to him. And Peyton Wilson, a rookie drafted out of North Carolina State, managed to also put in more time and more effort on that football field than most of these other players on here. Outside of those 4 guys in Watt, Hayward, Roberts, and Wilson, nobody else was doing anything at all. Being all lackadaisical on the football field and just taking whatever the Ravens were dishing out. So I ain't gonna lie to you. And even with some of these players having some tremendous seasons in the likes of Dante Jackson or even Beanie Bishop Jr., when push came to shove, especially over the course of these last 5 games specifically, y'all asses stood out as doing nothing notable from my perspective. So the fact that you didn't want to tighten up in these big moments displays a lot about those people as players. And that is not something that the Steelers organization should want to have around. So they got to get the fuck out. They got to go. All the rest of them. You rebuild through the draft. I don't know what quality free agents are even going to want to come to Pittsburgh after seeing a display like that, after seeing you in the biggest moments of the season, failing time and again, and not just failing in the most laughably horrible manners imaginable, time and again. You're getting walked over consistently. Who would want to come over to Pittsburgh and don that iconic black and yellow or gold, depending on certain situations? Who would want to don that proudly? Who would? After a display like that? That's horrible to see. And this is coming from a person who ain't even a remote Steelers fan at all. I have no dog in this fight. At all. My team's not even in the playoffs. You can imagine how Pittsburgh Steelers fans are feeling about this shit. Teams or people who have grown up on such physical teams in the past. The likes of Orion Clark We can even go back to the likes of the Mel Blunts of the world, the Jack Lamberts of the world, the Kevin Greens of the world. Teams predicated on physicality and defense and running the football. And they didn't do any of that shit in this game. So, I wouldn't break this game down completely on their end because they did nothing of note when it mattered the most. They don't deserve that this time. A change has got to be made if you're going to go out and play ball like this. That's horrible. It's horrible, man. I didn't even get around to George Pickens, which he's a huge part of the problem as well. And if you're him at this point, you just got to shut the fuck up. You just have to shut the fuck up. Because again, this box score will tell you that he had a good game. Not really when it mattered. And for as much shit as he wants to talk, he himself failed to contribute enough to really say anything that makes some goddamn sense. Every Steelers wide receiver wants to be like this. But at least with those guys, to an extent, when it came to the likes of Juju Smith-Schuster, when it came to the likes of Antonio Brown, even Hines Ward was a bit of a polarizing figure, more so for his play as a Steeler. I'm not including Chase Claypool in this. He wasn't no, we're not doing that. But those three guys and George Pickens, are kind of on the same plane. At least with those first three guys I mentioned, they at least performed when the lights were the brightest. George Pickens doesn't have that moment yet. And this season was just worse than the last couple. Now, whether that be completely on him or quarterback play, it's really up to other people to decide, quite frankly. But at the very least, you own some culpability here. And you don't even make note of that at all. You're just going to be completely mum on the role that you have here, but constantly demand for the ball at all times without actually committing yourself to undergo what it takes to become a true captain and true leader on this team. George Pickens is a very curious case, but I can't say that some people didn't see this coming. I mean, quite literally. Despite all of his talent, the Steelers saw the scouting report and multiple people from multiple publications cited maturity as a weakness for George Pickens. Still, you made the choice in hopes that the talent would exceed those issues and drafted him anyways, knowing that you've been in this position before with other wide receivers, and yet you don't take it upon yourself to do a better job of handling all of that and getting him fully ingrained in the culture to prevent those outbursts time and again. As crazy and as hilarious as some of those instances can be with him doing all this crazy shit on the field, it's hard to watch in a way as well. He's doing all of this unchecked. And mostly undisciplined. I mean, it's been recognized. You had Mike Tomlin last season call out he and Deontay Johnson for the bullshit that they were doing down the stretch last season. So Johnson's out of there now. Now it's just Pickens. You recognize that this happens, and you still haven't necessarily taken the action to put a stop to it. Maybe that's who he is completely, and maybe that will never change. But at the very least, you got to be able to prevent that from flaring up in most instances so that it does not become a distraction. And surely enough, it's become exactly that. Another distraction for a sorry organization, a reeling organization that was once proud. It meant something. It meant something to people to represent that team as fans. It meant something to represent that team as players. It meant something to those from the older guard who are now in the Hall of Fame. I can't imagine how Terry Bradshaw feels right now. See, I can't imagine how he's feeling after seeing that. Guys who worked their asses off came from not much back in the day to work themselves to becoming some of this franchise's best players. And then in their post-playing careers, maybe they've appeared on television, maybe they've worked regular jobs. But you could go anywhere and you could have people ask you, hey, what is it that you did? What would you like people to know about you? And the phrase, I was a Pittsburgh Steeler, or something along those lines would come up. And you would have different people try to inquire about that. Try to learn about the game from a perspective of such a historically good player or a recognizable figure from that team. Look no further than a guy like Franco Harris, God rest his soul, doing all of what he did, making a name for himself with not just the play, but other efforts off of the field. I don't see that right now from most of these players. Any of them go into a different career post-play and they try to say that they were proud members of the Pittsburgh Steelers, you would have different people laughing in their faces. Because they're going to go back to moments like this and ask exactly what did you do with them? How can you be proud of that? You got boat racing 6 straight games to close out the season, damn near. You've lost playoff games in 8 consecutive seasons. What is there to truly be proud of in that sense? Just thought. Moving on to the Bills and the Broncos. Now, at least with the Broncos, they got out to a hot start. I mean, you get Bo Nix doing his typical stuff. Though he would get some good passes to the likes of Cortland Sutton before another Javonte Williams run. And then on this next play, on a very deep shot to a receiver, Bo Nix would actually make history, as with his touchdown pass of 43 yards to Troy Franklin, they would become the first pair of teammates to score their first passing and receiving touchdowns in the playoffs with a connection with their former college mates. As they both, after Bo Nix transferred, they both attended Oregon at around the same time, and they were both drafted by the Broncos this season. So the connection's been long-standing. He'd been waiting for a while to get him one in the regular season, and it never happened. But Troy Franklin got his very first receiving touchdown in the NFL from his former teammate in college. So again, that was a cool story. They largely, on the offensive side, did nothing outside of that. I can tell you right now. They did not do anything at all. The Bills, though, were kept on ice. They drove down for a little bit, but Broncos defense held strong in the red zone and forced them to settle for a field goal. Another 3-and-out would give the Bills a chance to try and take some control. And granted, they would do that with an 81-yard drive that saw them take 7 minutes and 35 seconds off of the clock, throwing dinks and dunks all over the place, and eventually getting yet another rushing touchdown to James Cook, who still leads the league in scrimmage touchdowns. He's had a very great season. Again, I can't say it enough. This has certainly been his best to this point. He may be up for a contract, and I don't know. With a running back doing that, and given the fact that all three of the running backs who were previously put on franchise tags have now entered into the playoffs to this point while having great seasons of their own, the running back market looks a little more desirable than it has been in years past, especially for running backs that can display versatility in the rushing attack, in the passing game, being receivers out of the backfield for quarterbacks to have a bit of a safety valve in the backfield, per se. And if you can have somebody with that skill set perform at an exceptional level, I think you'll start to see contracts for them kind of shoot up in value again. Now, I don't know if it's going to get to anything absurd. The running back position is still the running back position in the eyes of the front office, unfortunately. There's still a sort of limit that they expect from a running back. There are still those who believe that once you reach the age of 30, you're damaged goods. So it's not going to be the case universally, but I think some teams will be willing to dish out heavier contracts to those guys. Anyway, as far as this game goes, they would trade punts back to back, and the Bills on their drive would take off a lot of time before punting themselves. The Broncos would try to mount a scoring drive before the end of the first half to try and gain some momentum back. You would have Bo Nix continuing to run and run and run when reads weren't open, but he would also get a nice pass, a couple of passes to Cortland Sutton, actually. And you would eventually have him kick a 50-yard field goal, Will Lutz, and it would miss completely. Whew. The Bills would get right back into it to open up the second half. In just a few plays, you would have Dawson Knox getting a 25-yard catch, reeling that in. And then they would eventually abuse James Cook for the rest of the drive. They would try to pass, and you would have, I believe, DJ Jones get in for the sack. Though, on the play, they would show as it was cutting the commercial break after the Bills would kick the field goal, there was holding. Aggressive holding. Pat Surtain II was grabbing right on Dawson Knox's jersey. And they missed it completely. And that was that. Now, the Broncos would get the ball back after, with that sack, securing their 65th one of the season. They get the ball back and go 3-and-out. But something very interesting and telling, very telling, happened over the course of this time. You see, I guess this was happening during the break. Bill Vinovich took it upon himself to apologize to Josh Allen for the missed call, consoling him and letting him know how sorry he is. Yes, players are going to talk to the referees, and those kinds of exchanges are going to happen. So that's not what truly caught my eye about this situation. But when you look at it, Josh Allen wasn't even in the field of play at that point when this happened. You see, his ass was chilling on the sideline. Like, what? You mean to tell me that Vinovich, an established ref over the years, say what you want about him, he's been doing this for so damn long, right? Your ass goes over there, willingly takes it upon himself to go over to the sideline when the man's not even on the field and do that. Just a little crazy. That's just a little crazy. And that's all I've got to say about that. That is very, very interesting stuff when you really think about it. The Bills would get the ball back yet again and would start out with some good momentum here. You would have Khalil Shakir yet again taking upon himself to gain more yards after the catch. And ironically enough, they showed a graphic that he is, in fact, the second best receiver after the catch in terms of yak, with the very first in the league being Jamar Chase. Just some food for thought there. Anyways, it would be pushed back with a penalty from Dalton Kincaid. And you would have Josh Allen trying to make a couple plays yet again, initially trying to scramble for 7 yards, and then attempting a short pass. But there would be a bit of a disaster here. It was quite unfortunate. It was just a horrible throw, horrible decision in general. You have Ray Davis, a shorter running back as it is, trying to get the ball in space like that. And Josh Allen misses him with a converging Brandon Jones who lights his ass up. And as that happens, you have Ray Davis on the ground for an extended period of time. Subsequently, he would be taken off the field, and he would not come back in the ball game. There is a great chance that it was a concussion. Of course, they threw a penalty on Brandon Jones. Now, he tried to apologize. He acknowledged that he didn't necessarily intend to do it. But anytime you're converging on a defenseless player and you're leading with your helmet to try and stop their momentum and such, they're going to call that every time. They would move on from that, though, and make some good things happen, as eventually Josh Allen would get down to 4th down, and you would think that they would try to run it up the middle with him, like they typically have this season. They instead opted for the pass. It took a while to develop, though, and eventually you would have Josh Allen scramble over to his right. Josh Allen would throw it back deep across his body. And eventually Ty Johnson, a player known for at least giving them a play per game that stands out, managed to notch his second one here with an exceptional fucking catch in the back of the end zone. I'll tell you that. This man literally got down his elbow and shin just in time. Because when you're talking about getting the ball in the back of the end zone, you need 2 body parts touching. Doesn't have to be feet. So he made the smart play to come back to the ball in that sense and somehow avoided having his feet touch out at all. It was so close. But the ruling would eventually stand. And they would get the 2-point conversion to take the 21-7 lead. You would have the Broncos stall out yet again with the help of the Bills defense, and eventually they would get right back to it. You would get in another third and I guess manageable where he would throw a deep pass and kind of get Curtis Samuel even more open. The Ohio State man would then make some Ohio State moves, juking out everybody with his fast twitch, getting a 55-yard touchdown catch to give them a 28-7 lead. We knew the Broncos weren't coming back in this one. They would try, but eventually turn the ball over on downs, as the Bills would just take time off the clock and get a field goal to go. Once more, they tried it, and eventually on fourth down, you would have Damar Hamlin intercept Bo Nix's pass. All the Bills had to do was insert Mitch Trubisky and take the time out. Bills would get this one 31-7. This is what I expected. This is what I expected. Literally. The Broncos weren't going to win this one. I don't know what people were really thinking about. Josh Allen had a good game. 272 yards, 2 touchdown passes on 76.9% completion. And also, Josh Allen with his 46 rushing yards becomes, temporarily speaking, the most prolific rushing quarterback in postseason history in terms of yardage, as his 610 rushing yards, I believe, surpassed that of Lamar Jackson, who just broke it and reached 608 just a mere few hours earlier. So they're just going to keep on going back and forth with this one. And with the results of this game, with all the AFC action out of the way, the next bracket would actually be set as the Ravens will be facing off against the Bills, which is going to be absolute chaos. And the Texans will be facing off against the Chiefs, which is going to be absolute chaos. But to each their own. James Cook would have 120 rushing yards and a touchdown. As for the Broncos, Bo Nix, just 59.1% of his passes are completed. He had 144 passing yards with just a single touchdown, also being the most prolific rusher on his team, which was also going to be the Broncos' downfall. I mean, nobody else outside of him seems to really be able to run the ball effectively. And most of these runs are just broken plays. They've got to figure that out entirely. Courtland Sutton would also have 5 receptions for 75 yards in this game. Meanwhile, moving on to the Packers and the Eagles. And in this one, the Packers seemed to be finished before the game even truly started. I kid you not. You would have the former Packer, ironically enough, in Oren Burks on the kickoff, force Keyshawn Nixon to fumble the football. And Jeremiah Trotter Jr., for their special teams unit, would recover it, giving the Eagles an easy shot to just get a Saquon Barkley run in there or so, and then eventually get the touchdown to Jahan Dotson, giving him his first as an Eagle, and giving them a 7-0 lead, spotting them one for free because you couldn't protect the ball on a kickoff return. To the Packers' defense's credit, though, the rest of this game would see a stalemate defensively. Both teams doing their best to pressure the likes of Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts respectively, with the likes of Jordan Davis, Kenny Clark, Jalen Carter, just alternating between the teams here. Rashawn Gary would obviously make his presence felt. And that's really all you can ask for if you are the Packers defense. I mean, their line wasn't necessarily slated to hold up that well against the top defense in the league for the Eagles. And the Georgia boys all over the place. Oh, Nolan Smith would become really important in this game, too. That man was making plays all over the damn place. He got 2 sacks in this ball game, eventually. Way he was playing, man, certainly helped things. But their play on the back end also really gave them the distance they would eventually need in this ball game. They would, at the end of the first quarter, however, settle for a field goal to give them a 10-0 lead. And then the bullshit started for Jordan Love. He tried to throw up a deep shot and would test Darius Slay Jr. for some reason. It was underthrown, had the perfect undercut, and Darius Slay would get it immediately. Packers would eventually force the Eagles to settle for punting. And the Packers would try to mount a drive, but it ended up being an absolute fucking waste. Imagine that you take up 7 minutes and 37 seconds off the clock, right? And you get only 37 yards down the field, which seems crazy in and of itself. The fact that you're averaging just around 3 yards of play is paltry. But it would do something if you at least get on the board, right? Brandon McManus, who had been mostly accurate all season long, misses a field goal from 38 yards out, and the Packers remain scoreless. But the Packers defense on the back end as well, doing their best to cover the likes of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, keep everything locked up to where Jalen Hurts has no choice but to get out of the pocket, and Quay Walker and Rashawn Gary stop him short of the line of the game, forcing them to punt again. And then just a terrible sequence overall happens. You have them driving down a little bit. This sequence is just so bad. Like, literally, on first down, you would have Jordan Love try to throw it out of the backfield to Chris Brooks. And it was incomplete. But I kid you not, it was right in the area where Zach Bond was. And he had a good chance to intercept that one. He just missed it. So what does Jordan Love proceed to do? He steps back and throws it straight into the hands of Zach Bond over the middle of the field for his second interception of the quarter. That just should not happen. Now, yes, on the play, you'll see that Tucker Kraft does slip as he's trying to make the break in his route. And that certainly affected things. It did. But my pushback to that is that in colder temperatures, a field like that is going to be slick. You have to expect that something like that will happen, and it's not always going to go in your favor. That's just what it is. That's on Jordan Love. Like, yes, there's probably a safety that he's trying to eye off and distract. But you mean to tell me that you're so laser focused on drawing off that attention that you don't note from some peripheral view that the person you're trying to target fell down? And it probably wouldn't be wisest to still try to force the ball in that area. That's all I'm saying. You have to be smarter in that decision. You have to be smarter. Simply put. The Eagles would get it back yet again with a chance to maybe get some points on the board. They weren't really compelled. And they would take it in to the second half with a 10-0 lead. The Eagles would be forced to punt again to open up the third quarter. And the Packers, with the help of them actually starting to get Josh Jacobs involved out of the backfield as a pass catcher rather than as a runner, would actually start to make a little bit of progress. Ultimately, you would have Dontayvion Wicks pick up 29-yard gain on a pretty good catch before penalties got in the way of the Packers' ability to convert here. They would ultimately have to settle for a Brandon McManus field goal, and this one he would make. The Eagles would then take a 5-play, 68-yard drive down for a touchdown with the help of Devontae Smith getting a 28-yard gain, and then Dallas Goedert just owning Carrington Valentine. There's even a way to put it. Literally. I kid you not. He gets the ball and then stiff arms Carrington Valentine on 3 different occasions over the course of that run. It's not even like Valentine fell down. He literally got punched in the mouth, if that's how you want to put it, again and again and again. Do I need to reference the Marshawn Lynch quote? Do I need to reference that interview? Because quite literally, Dallas Goedert must have been listening to that earlier and decided to apply it in a real football game. Ironically enough, you have Valentine wearing the number 24 in the midst of all this, being forced to just take that on. He got him so fucked up. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, Xavier McKinney, after Jake Elliott missed the damn extra point and cut the commercial, it would come back on the broadcast and they would show Xavier McKinney calmly talking, trying to understand what the hell Carrington Valentine was doing. And then as soon as he goes over to his own space on the sideline, this man starts rage quitting and slamming his helmet down. That's how bad that was. And I'm like, from Xavier McKinney's standpoint, can you truly blame him for having that reaction? Can you? I don't know if you can. Now, the Packers would have a little sign of life, but you would have Dontayvion Wicks drop a pass prior to Josh Jacobs resuscitating everything for them on this run. Literally. Just running through everybody. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson couldn't make the tackle. Cooper DeJean got trucked over. Quinyon Mitchell was barely able to get a hold of him before he got into the end zone. And he was stopped at the 1-yard line. He would eventually run it in because you got to reward that, right? The Eagles would then take 7 minutes and 23 seconds off the clock, picking up 58 yards on their drive, aided with a couple of stupid penalties from Green Bay. And ultimately, they would get a field goal here. The Packers, on a drive that they absolutely had to have, would fail, as Jordan Love would get an incomplete pass to Malik Heath. The Eagles would settle for yet another field goal, and Jordan Love, just for shits and gigs, would throw another interception to none other than Quinyon Mitchell, giving him the first of his NFL career. Ultimately, the Eagles just had to kneel it out, and they would win the ball game. Now, this wasn't without a lot of injuries on both sides. Now, Darius Slade Jr. would finish the game, but he got injured at some point. You would have Elgton Jenkins get injured for the Packers at some point, and I think he would miss the rest of the game as well. You would have Jaden Reed, Dontavion Wicks, and Romeo Doubs suffer injuries in this ball game, with Christian Watson already being out due to injury for the rest of the season. Nolan Smith Jr. was down for a little bit. Nakobe Dean would actually be taken out for the rest of this ball game as well. Josh Myers would be taken out for the rest of this ball game as well. War of attrition on both sides. And while, yes, you can look at Jordan Love's performance and say that the lack of weapons did hurt him here, ultimately, most of those weapons came out of the ball game later on, when the Packers were much further out of it. It's not like any of those injuries were suffered from the get-go. He had chance after chance after chance, while all of those core guys were on the football field to make better decisions and get them in scoring position more often than not, which he failed to do, ultimately. They were playing, and the core amount, or the majority of his numbers, looked worse across the board to this point. I mean, 212 passing yards and 3 interceptions. And straight up. Most of them with those very players in the ballgame. So I assure you, while it's unfortunate that they suffered those injuries, they had no true effect on this ballgame. I would argue that the couple of linemen getting hurt kind of worsened things. I mean, again, Eagles are the top unit in the league, and they got the Jordan Love all day long. Zach Bond completely fucked up his mental, man. He got all up in his mind, man. Just absolutely dirty work on their end. They had a great game plan to guard everything. That wouldn't have made any difference, really. Josh Jacobs would have 81 rushing yards on 18 carries for a touchdown. As for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts would have 131 yards and 2 touchdowns on 61.9% completion. He started out more accurate, though. And he was definitely struggling to find open receivers as well, while also being very scared to run at times. It would pick up as the game went on, but yeah. Especially in the first half, he was sliding in the backfield instead of taking off and running, interestingly enough. As for Saquon Barkley, he would have 25 rushes for 119 yards on the game. Devontae Smith would have 4 receptions for 55 yards, and Dallas Goedert would have 4 receptions for 47 yards. Let's just say that this was not A.J. Brown's game, and he would make that known with a development that I'll end up talking about later on. But now we move on to the final game on Sunday with the Commanders and the Bucs. And off the rip, man, Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore took a very, very interesting turn, I will say. Yes, it did kind of... This matchup was going to be looked at just a little differently with the fact that Marshawn Lattimore had been dealing with a hamstring injury for all this time. So, he's coming back healthier, but not at 100% completely. Still, Mike Evans got right down to business. And I mean, I guess he made that clear in the interview leading up to the game. He was in Marshawn Lattimore's ass during this stretch of time. Catch after catch on him. deep catches too. He was sagging off a little bit, and Mike Evans was certain to make him pay for it. Eventually on that drive, though, it settled for a field goal, and then the Commanders would get it, eventually starting out with a 35-yard catch by the likes of Terry McLaurin. It got down to fourth down, which would become a theme for them over the course of this night. This one, though, they would not get, trying to hit Austin Eckler, and it failed. The Bucs would then punt the ball, and to start out the second quarter, the Commanders would have a 92-yard drive with 17 plays and taking 9 minutes and 8 seconds off the clock. With Jayden Daniels taking it upon himself to make multiple plays that would extend drives. They convert this third down to Zach Ertz, and then eventually get Austin Eckler helping in the rushing attack. Before another 3rd and 3 saw Jayden Daniels get it close, and then have Austin Eckler get the fourth down conversion to extend the drive. Olamide Zaccheaus would see himself pick up a third down, and then on yet another third down, making them 3 of 4 on this one. They would have a 10-yard touchdown pass to the likes of Dyami Brown, giving the Commanders a 7-3 lead, and giving them a hell of a lot of momentum. To have a drive like that in the postseason and kind of steal some time from the Bucs to work with, it's exceptional work. Bucs would go 3 and out, and the Commanders would get right back to ball control. They would have another 5-minute and 28-second drive here with more notable conversions by the likes of Austin Eckler and Jayden Daniels. Though on this specific 3rd and 6, that would not come to be, as Zane McCollum would actually deflect the solid pass to Terry McLaurin, and the Commanders would have to settle for yet another field goal. Knowing that their backs were against the wall a little bit, the Bucs decided to run some tempo and would get the Commanders in some unfavorable situations before Mike Evans continued the stretch of putting that belt to ass. 3 different catches on this drive, multiple to pick up burst downs, and eventually got the one off of a beautiful pass from a single yard out to tie up the ball game. They replayed the pass a ton, but it was exceptional. I mean, you have Quan Martin knowing that the ball is coming that way, watching the flat. Or, I guess, being in a hook, per se. You have him watching that. And he can't necessarily turn his back to it. So he has to try to account for Mike Evans, face guard him. And Mayfield throws the ball over the outstretched hands and damn near shoulder of Quan Martin, while Mike Evans is being guarded by Marshawn Lattimore. Boxes out both of them and gets it in to tie up the ballgame. Pretty absurd stuff. The Bucs defense would not really take account of that momentum, though, and let the Commanders get right down and score a field goal. Now, it could have been worse after a couple of solid plays to Dyami Brown, especially with him managing to truck the dog shit out of Mike Edwards, who I suppose, after being in Kansas City for this time, wanted to just go back to his former team. That game would be 13-10 before the Bucs would get the ball back, and they, offensively, wanted to keep it rolling. They would do exactly that with the help of Mike Evans and Bucky Irving as well, with him getting a few solid runs on this drive and eventually closing it out with a 4-yard catch for touchdown. The fourth quarter was, it was pretty damn good. Said fourth down, that was really the theme of this quarter when you think about it. That's what this came down to. If you're going to be that risky, can you get it? The Commanders would go 0 for 1 in this quarter to start out, as Terry McLaurin would eventually get himself a solid game to open it up. Now, Zach Ertz would give them a true fourth down conversion to extend the drive. But my 0 for 1 comes from the fact that on 4th and goal, as they tried to target Zach Ertz again, they stopped him. Now, this is after McCollum had actually denied De'Ami Brown a chance to catch the ball with a DPI. And eventually, while other penalties could have been called over the course of this sequence here, they ultimately got bailed out with that. But would not be so forgiving. Just a little bit. Within just 4 plays, the Commanders would have the ball in a similar spot. They tried to run a sweep, and Baker Mayfield and Jalen McMillan clearly were not on the same page, with Mayfield fumbling the snap and ultimately getting Bobby Wagner to recover it, giving him a little bit of revenge, especially after what the hell Baker Mayfield did to him earlier in the game. I couldn't even believe what I was watching in that moment. That man truck stick the dog out of him. Dog shit out of him, bro. I can't even lie to you, bro. Bobby Wagner's a legend, man. But that shit, like, you gotta give Baker Mayfield his credit, bro. That's just fucking, that was crazy to see. I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, we get them ball back in very favorable field position. You had to try to go for a touchdown here. And ultimately, they would be 1 for 2. It would get down to 4th and 2. And Terry McLaurin would get it in the back of the end zone, giving them a lead. The Bucs had a chance to get some points on the drive, and momentum was on their side. But once more, with another bad snap exchange, or I guess just very poorly timed one, you would have Bucky Irving try to run the ball on 3rd and 1, and he would ultimately lose yardage, forcing the Bucs to settle and forcing their defense back on the field. Think about Jayden Daniels being a rookie in this situation, fighting for your first playoff win, and it coming down to this. It seemed like he was ready for it. It seemed like he was totally ready for it. Even with the odds being stacked against them, you thought with Jayden Daniels being out there, he was going to find a way to make something happen. And ultimately, when it came down to it, he used both his arms and his legs, eventually getting past Kalijah Kancey and picking up the game-sealing first down, potentially. Now, Zane Gonzalez would go out there, and he would kick the ball, and it would reach territory, but it doinked off the right upright once more and went into the goalpost. Went into the back of the net from there, giving the Commanders a 23-20 victory in the wildest of ways. How many Sunday Night Football games are going to come down to made field goals off of doinked kicks to win ball games? How many times is that going to happen? Like, this is very, like, the amount of times it's happened this season alone, not even just in the NFL, but at most levels right now, it's like, okay, I mean, I guess sometimes it pays to be a little lucky rather than being good, but hey, Jayden Daniels is headed to Detroit with this, as the Commanders are the lowest remaining seed, and the Lions would take that on. Very great accomplishment for him overall. His 92-yard touchdown that he led would be the longest for a rookie quarterback since 1996 with Jim Everett. And also, you would give the Commanders their first playoff win since 2005 when Mark Brunell was at the helm at the quarterback position. .268 passing yards for him to go along with 2 touchdowns, and he completed 68.6% of his passes. He would have 36 rushing yards on the ground as well. For them to be one of the best rushing attacks, to eventually have to face the Lions, who are much better in most regards, you're going to want to be able to run the football a bit more effectively than that, but they got away with it here. Terry McLaurin would have 89 receiving yards and a touchdown on 7 catches, while De'Ami Brown would have 89 yards receiving on 5 catches and a touchdown. As for the Bucs, Baker Mayfield had 185 yards passing, along with 2 touchdown passes. Bucky Irving added 77 rushing yards on the ground, with Mike Evans also getting 92 receiving yards on 7 catches and a touchdown. He didn't have a bad performance at all, but very untimely turnover gave the Commanders the victory ultimately. Gotta protect the football better in that situation. It's as simple as that. With this win also, Jayden Daniels would become the 4th rookie quarterback to win their playoff debut on the road with the likes of Roethlisberger, Wilson, and Sanchez also. So that's interesting. Moving on to the game last night between the Rams and the Vikings, obviously there is a lot to preface here, as it would be detailed over the course of the last few days that scheduling for the game was going to have to be altered with the wildfires taking place in Los Angeles. Obviously, being a devastating situation, they wanted to avoid any public safety risks of such high magnitude with those just ripping through the city. Apparently, it's been one of their staples in California. The Palisades specifically recognizes a hallmark destination for them, and in just a matter of a few days, with all of the conditions around there, it's basically rubble. There's no telling how long it will take for them to restore infrastructure, but man, it's just a bad thing all around. You know, you feel truly heartbroken for the people there who may have lost loved ones, who may have lost their homes over this time. And you're just hoping that eventually that community can heal. But as far as this particular event goes, the playoff game, I don't think that postponing one was ever in the cards. We've just got to be real about that. Postponing playoff football is probably one of the more rash decisions than that the league would ever come to make. And I wouldn't envision that. But they had to act, and they had to act fast. Thankfully, an unlikely ally would open their doors, as the Cardinals would not only send planes to Los Angeles to help different personnel for the Rams and different members of the organization get out of Los Angeles and prepare, but they would also allow the game to be played in State Farm Stadium. Now, it's weird. Obviously, they're division rivals, and ultimately the Cardinals were knocked out of the playoffs. They're not playing for anything. They really didn't have to open their doors if they didn't Like, let's be honest, they really didn't have to open their doors to the Rams here. But they made the conscious effort to do it. Not only that, they made it to where it could feel as though the Rams were truly playing at home. From what I heard on the broadcast yesterday, as they were detailing the lead up to the game, you had Cardinals players, or the Rams players, being allowed to use the Cardinals players' locker rooms and lockers and training area to prepare for the game. Very great show of solidarity. So before talking about anything as far as this specific game goes, you gotta tip your hat to the league in this situation for handling it in such a way. And you gotta tip your hat to the Cardinals for doing this. I mean, quite literally, they put the Rams end zones in there. They put the Rams logo in there to try to give it that effect, even if they couldn't necessarily be in California for obvious reasons, to feel as though you are actually getting the home game that you worked your ass off for as the higher seed in the NFC and the NFC West division champion. So you have to give major props to those guys. As far as the game itself goes, let's just say that the Rams were certainly playing with the spirit of those Californian people in mind. Definitely playing their hearts out for all of them. They would get it going immediately. They would have Pucanacula, though, on a very weird screenplay or so. You get stuffed in the backfield. It was just a bad play call. But outside of that, you would have them get really aggressive here. I mean, on 4th and 1, they would bait the likes of Jonathan Bullard into committing a neutral zone infraction on a sort of single back formation. They would run it out of the same formation again on the 1st and 5 that they got from their 5-yard line. And smartly, I don't know if this was intentional, but Kyron Williams would do a good job of sneaking out off of the block attempt and getting himself wide open in the middle of the field. Now, yes, you never, and I mean never, throw back across your body late over the middle of the field. You never do it. But it was acceptable. Matthew Stafford wasn't necessarily drifting out too far, and it was wide open and for the taking. There wasn't a Vikings defender in reach of Kyron Williams. He would eventually, on this play, get a touchdown to give them a 7-0 lead to open up the ball game. From the jump, seeing how it worked last week, especially when the Lions did it, but the Rams, being a better defense and known for sending their own exotic packages as well, they would make it their mission to pressure Sam Darnold all night long. And with the 3 and out on this drive being just the very tip of the iceberg, it more than certainly worked. Like, we've gotta discuss that. I mean, they made life a living hell for Sam Darnold back there. Quite literally. The Rams called a great game. I kid you not, on the defensive end. They absolutely did. Vikings have a lot to figure out as well. And it starts with the O-line. It does. It does not help that Christian Darrisaw is on IR right now, and they had to get Cam Robinson, who is fine. It also didn't help that Brian O'Neill would actually be taken out of the game later on. But those guys are porous up there. they can't really protect to save their lives, it seems. And against better defenses, the offensive line has crumbled. In the same breath, Sam Darnold is not necessarily helping their case. Apparently, he averaged 4.8 seconds of time before throwing the ball or before doing anything with the football, which is wild. Now, he has been most effective this season when plays actually develop completely. I mean, look no further than the 97-yard touchdown pass he had gotten to Justin Jefferson early in the year. That was a slow developing play. But when it got completely open, he then chose to make the decision rather than throwing Justin Jefferson completely open in that regard. You're not going to get looks like that all the time from the defense. So you've got to make something happen. You've got to be able to make quicker decisions. You've got to be able to throw guys open even when it doesn't seem like they have a realistic chance. Throw your guy open. And when everything breaks down, you've got to be willing to at least try to scramble for yardage. Now, Sam Darnold by no means is a complete dual threat quarterback, but he can move a little bit, at least enough to at least try to take the pressure off of the offensive line here and commit the defense to enforcing some sort of balance to where all of these other plays may start to open up for you. At every point of time, Sam Darnold just stepped back in the pocket without doing much of anything. And he made only a few quick reads and rapid-fire decisions. Outside of that, it was him holding on to the ball for way too long at a specific point of time. And ultimately, that would cost him the game. Now, they were doing similar things to Matthew Stafford, and credit to him, he overcame it. Because he is an established veteran who makes rapid-fire decisions. And yes, in the past, he has certainly been reckless. There's no denying that. But he has seen most everything. And he can recognize when pressure's coming. So he knows all of the different counters to it. Sam Darnold is eventually going to have to learn that. And it feels like the beginning of this lesson has come the hard way for him. Because to have the showing you did against the Lions last week and then come into this game playing in a similar way. Immobile in the pocket, susceptible to getting drilled in the backfield by different edge rushers and even cornerbacks in some cases. Errant reads and overthrown passes. Like some of the gimme balls he missed in this game were just as egregious as last week's. And then not to mention, too, ultimately, their ground game, to an extent, when it mattered, was held in check. So naturally, even then, they're going to keep on sending the heat, and there's nothing you can do about it, unless you change up your play style a little bit. The Rams would belt out to a 10-0 lead, and then the Vikings would actually be able to score a field goal with Justin Jefferson getting more involved. Now, there would be a little bit of controversy as on this first down to open up the Rams' next drive, you would have a potential fumble return for touchdown by Blake Cashman. They would overturn it and call it an incomplete pass. But when you look at it, this man, Matthew Stafford, literally puts the ball on the ground with one hand out. It looks like it's traveling in Pukenakua's direction, but I can tell you right now, there's no way he was attempting to throw the football. He put it straight on the ground. I kid you not. That was certainly a bad call. Even still, even if they give him that and it ties up the game, I don't know how much it would have changed for the Vikings. Like, the Rams' game plan was never going to change. And it seemed like no matter the context, Sam Darnold was just not understanding of what was happening for some reason. Completely reverted back to traditional ways. It was almost as if he was truly expecting everything to just get open with him holding the ball for that long. The Rams are a different beast in that regard. You weren't going to get away with that this time. Surely enough, you would have him force up an errant pass after being pressured for that much time, and it would be intercepted by Cooper DeJean, with him making a good break on the ball as he tried to get it out to Jordan Addison on a sort of out route. But ultimately, he strong-armed it, and it just got right in the hands of Cooper DeJean. Things would get even worse after another 3-and-out from the Rams, as you would have, after a potential Josh Oliver fumble was overturned due to him being down by contact, Sam Darnold, within just a couple plays, got fucking ragdoll tossed down to the goddamn ground by the likes of Ahkello Witherspoon, who would force a sack fumble, and then Jared Verse would get in and recover the sack fumble for a touchdown, as he would become the first rookie to record a defensive touchdown, or first defensive rookie to record a defensive touchdown in their playoff debut since J.J. Watt in 2011. That gave the Rams a 17-3 lead. The Vikings were in complete and total desperation mode, but Bryce Young, Neville Gallimore, and Kobe Turner would eventually say fuck you to that notion. And the Rams, with just a little bit of time, would be given a short field to work with. So, bad to completely worse, as the likes of Davis Allen would get in and score a 13-yard touchdown, giving the Rams a 24-3 lead before the end of the half. Scoring would ultimately end in the third quarter with Josh Carty kicking yet another field goal in this ball game, and also the one, I guess, redeemable drive for Sam Darnold in this one, as he actually would dart out a rapid-fire pass to T.J. Hockenson, who miraculously reeled it in, despite it not being accurate at all. He would get a 26-yard touchdown, but that was really it. Teams are just punting the ball back and forth to each other, with the Vikings trying to get desperation plays to happen. What I will say, though, is that I did not like the decision for Kevin O'Connell to kick it with about 12 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. I didn't like the decision to punt there. Yes, it's 4th and 21. Yes, outside of the drive that T.J. Hockenson finished with a touchdown on, you hadn't done a lot of scoring. I understand. But you've got to show some effort here. You've got to try. You just have to try it. You live with whatever result, but you've got to put it all on the line at that point. You can't just concede like that. In postseason football, you can't do it. It's just not a good look. And I'm not even saying that this entire game was terribly coached by Kevin O'Connell. I think he honestly did fine. The execution was just poor, and the Rams defense got in the mind of Sam Darnold to where he decided to start making errant play at their errant play. That's what it really comes down to. Still, you don't want that to be your lasting moment in a playoff game that you just gave up. Darnold will have a touchdown and an interception with 245 yards passing on 62.5% completion. TJ Hawkinson would have 5 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown in this one, with Justin Jefferson also getting 5 receptions for 58 yards. As for the Rams, Matthew Stafford would have 209 passing yards with 2 touchdown passes on 70.4% completion. And Kyron Williams would add 76 yards on the ground. Again, great win by the Rams, even though it should be the Seahawks in this wild card. The fact that you could overcome all of that over the course of the week leading up to it. I mean, their facility was in imminent danger with these wildfires going on as well. So they had to practice elsewhere. Your preparation was altered. You're doing this in a completely different atmosphere. Your whole schedule, to an extent, around just football has changed drastically for the time being. And yet they would not only win the game, but win like this. This is a good overall statement. And it's definitely a great tell of where your team was. Great testament to your football team. No doubt about that. I don't know if they're going to make a run, but it's a quality postseason win. I'll tell you that. And that'll do it for all the playoff football related action. There were some overall developments that bled over from not just the playoff games, though, but also the Black Monday cycle with hirings and potential firings of different figures in coaching staff and the front office into it as a follow-up to the quote-unquote setback in Deshaun Watson's process from recovery. They would actually cite just a few days back that the Achilles injury he suffered was completely reaggravated and he would need surgery. So his 2025 season is in even more danger now. Even more jeopardy than it was from the previous report. And everything stated there reigns true. From the business side of things, it's just a complete whiff, though the Haslam collective is used to that at this point. And from the player's perspective, you're hoping that eventually Watson can come back to form and recover from this completely. In other news, it'd be detailed that defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen from the 49ers would be ousted from his role. The 49ers defense, even with the heavy amount of injuries that they suffered and even with some core players missing some time, like Dre Greenlaw most notably, their defense regressed completely this season, and especially in divisional matches, with them in the fourth quarter blowing multiple leads this season alone against just divisional opponents. So you can imagine how it was against most other teams on their schedule. The Raiders would fire general manager Tom Telesco over this course of the time after firing Antonio Pierce. They needed to clean house once more, or felt as though they needed to. I get Telesco, totally. But it's like, with Pierce as well, why get Pierce as an interim and then hire him for just a year knowing that you're not going to be the best and then let him go? Why are you going to hire Telesco when you recognize the type of bullshit he was doing with the Chargers just a season earlier? You take him on and give him the job for a year and you let him go. What was the point of getting either of them in the first place then? Marcus Robinson, prior to entering the match against the Vikings yesterday, would actually be charged with DUI officially stemming from the very incident after they played Philadelphia in November. And ironically enough, the Rams will be playing the Eagles in the divisional round as the higher remaining seed. The Falcons would fire defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake. Yet another defense that was just, honestly, they weren't the best from the jump. I'm not going to lie to you. They were horrible most all season long. So you've definitely got to look for a change there. I get it. The Pats would officially hire Mike Vrabel as the next head coach of the New England Patriots. Obviously, him being a former player there, 3-time Super Bowl champion with the team as a player, and a head coach of the Titans for the past few years prior to being ousted from his position after an unsuccessful streak. He would definitely be able to kind of fit right into this role. And he would say that he wants to galvanize the team and put them in the right direction they need to be in order to win football games. If the man could have the success with lowly quarterbacks as a Titans head coach, with the potential that Drake May has, there could be something here. The Bears would express their interest in Notre Dame head coach Marcus Freeman. Obviously, with him becoming not only the first black head coach to compete for a national championship in such a game in college football history, but with it being imminent and with him trying his hardest to get his team prepared for it, I don't really see how they would be able to make that happen right now. They want to interview him. He's going to be busy. What time would he really have right now to make that happen as he's trying to get the Fighting Irish ready for the Buckeyes in the national championship game on November 20th? Well, January 20th. I don't know how much time he will have. And even when that passes, is like he signed a contract extension with Notre Dame this very season. I don't see him leaving a program that he's still trying to establish something at. This has been his best season to date. And every single year, as the head coach, he's gotten better and better while having some level of success on a consistent basis. Why give that up after just 3 years' time? Doesn't really make sense from his end. It'll be detailed that Khalil Mack would consider retirement after becoming a free agent for the very first time in his football career. I get it, especially with the way that the Chargers went out. Maybe Khalil Mack doesn't feel as though he has much more to give to the game. If he does decide to leave the Chargers, I would expect him to try to swing his way over to a team that's bankable for a potential Super Bowl. Wouldn't it be something if he became a Chief? That's not going to happen. All right. This whole Cowboys situation is just a terrible one. Like, it would be stated officially over the course of the last couple days that Mike McCarthy would be given the eligibility to talk to other teams, and that Jerry Jones would have interest in Deion Sanders, and it's a mutual interest at that. Now, I'm going to touch on Mike McCarthy situation first, because this is yet another representation of how Jerry Jones may actually have no idea of what the fuck he wants to do with the organization and what the hell he is currently doing with the organization. Because it's like, what the hell? You have got to, at some point, get your head on straight, bro. I mean, earlier in the damn season, as it's winding down, you have Jerry Jones kind of expressing praise or praising Mike McCarthy for what he's done, but remaining mum on any potential negotiations or transactions as it pertains to McCarthy in the offseason. Then we get to the offseason, and you take it upon yourself to block Mike McCarthy from interviewing other teams in hopes that you may be able to re-sign him or something. Then we find out over the course of this time that you're not even making any progress on negotiations at all. He's just there. There for what? You're not going to find a common ground with a contract. What the hell is he still there for? And then it led to the decision where you finally let him go. And with him finding these interviews from other teams, he's no longer the Cowboys head coach, as his contract expired, and there was literally nothing on the table to work with. Like, all of this back and forth to get absolutely nowhere. What the hell are you retaining him for if you're not going to sign him? Like, what do you think this is? You ruined your chance right there. If you were really hell-bent on signing Mike McCarthy, you would have done it the second the offseason hit, to be completely honest. Why are you giving people to run around like that? Making them think all these different things in the situation. When you recognize that if you are trying to make some kind of change in the organization, generally speaking, it's going to have a tremendous effect in both the short term and the long term. And that you would have to be very calculated in your decision making here. But it doesn't seem like that was accounted for at all. And not to mention, too, that with that, they lose out on the rights to try and interview specific candidates. If they were looking for any of the football teams or any of the candidates from the football teams that are currently still in the playoffs, they missed out on them because those guys are not going to have a chance to spend that time in interviews as they prepare their different units on their respective football teams for divisional round football while your asses are at home. Can't do it now. So now you've got to look elsewhere. And the overall market doesn't necessarily look desirable in the NFL and vice versa. Because honestly, man, it's the Jerry Jones show in Dallas. Ain't nobody trying to deal with that shit. No sane individual is trying to deal with that shit. But when we move on into the Deion Sanders aspect of this, well, he's not your average individual. And I mean, it's certainly an interesting one. Deion Sanders has certainly cultivated his own sort of personality over the course of his playing career, over the course of his time as a media personality for NFL Network and over the course of his time as head coach. I mean, even in the games last season, well, season before last for Colorado, where they weren't doing much of anything. You tuned into the game, or tuned into different interviews to see Deion Sanders. And he's got a lot going for him right now. So, even with him trying to deny that he would go to the league in this situation, because obviously he may still be trying to build something in Colorado, and I think that's the best case scenario as well. You still got a lot to prove as a program, despite your 9-4 record this season. The next step should be getting more ranked wins and making a Big 12 championship game. Even winning one. That should be the goal for the next season. To not even make full progression in that regard and then jump to the NFL is a bit bold. And prior to becoming a college football head coach, he was, I believe, a coach for a rec league. He'd only gotten started with it a few years ago. And as good of a coach as he has been in terms of, to an extent, recruiting, and also what he's done for Colorado in general, you've still got a decent amount to accomplish before even making such a move. Of course, though, the Cowboys are going to go for the optics and try to make that happen. And again, it's like, yeah, sure, but we think Deion Sanders is really going to be able to do most of the same stuff. Even if Jerry Jones and him have mutual respect, is he really going to be able to do some of the same things there? With Jones at the helm, I don't know how likely that is, to be honest with you. But the whole situation will be followed. In the midst of that, it would be detailed that the Bears would express their interest in Mike McCarthy openly, and after having their request blocked initially, it reopened again. So they're going to go ahead and try to interview Mike McCarthy now. It would be detailed that A.J. Brown is actually helping individuals see overnight sales increases in books. You see, during the game, A.J. Brown, with him only getting a reception in 10 yards on the night, he decided to do something very interesting and pull out a book in the middle of the game. Now, it would be detailed that it was a self-help book called High Excellence, I believe. And he was reading that on the sidelines while making all of these just crazy expressions. Now, trust me, I don't have a problem with nobody reading a book. But the way I saw it initially, I'm like, dude, okay, you know that the media, especially after what happened earlier in the season with you just saying one simple word, they ran with that. You don't expect them to run with this? This sort of allusion to being disinterested in the game or such when you're not getting the football and things like that. You know those narratives are going to run rampant. Why even draw that attention to the situation? Turns out it was a pretty good thing. That hasn't really happened for A.J. Brown. And also, the author of said book has seen an increase in purchases of the book overnight. So the number one hottest seller on Amazon right now, as detailed by NFL insiders earlier today. Very, very interesting deviation from the norm for the NFL. But, hey, 'tis a pretty good look for the author of this one. It would also be detailed that Tank Dell would officially begin to undergo the litany of surgeries he will need to repair the ligaments in his knee and also get his ACL in check. That, again, I really cannot envision him seeing the field next season either. I would just hope that he can recover in time. And really after that, whatever happens is truly left up to chance here. Like, I cannot sit here and tell you definitively that he will be playing another snap of football in his career. But at the very least, you will hope that for his sake, he can at least operate to great capacity in just daily life overall. At least move around. You know, that's all you can ask for with something like this. And that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.